Thank you, Patrick. Now, let's move on to Twitter. Well, to social media news, first of all. And, well, Euronews here has a headline, "Why is Elon Musk's Twitter being sued in Germany?" And it's, of course, about anti-Semitism. So let's see, the lawsuit filed by Hate Aid, a digital rights organization, and the European Union of Jewish Students argues that social media company has failed to its own rules when it comes to anti-Semitic content. The organization claims the tweets in question were reported to Twitter but not taken down. The platform even allegedly refused to remove one comment related to Holocaust denial, which is criminalized in Germany. Now, we're not allowed to see what these tweets are because they're not linked in this new Euronews article, so we can't make any kind of decision about this. But this is the key part. The case will try to determine whether Twitter is legally obliged to remove such material. But what's unique about the case is that the organization isn't suing Twitter on the basis of German law, but on the platform's own terms of service and rules, as explains Josephine Ballon, head of legal at Hate Aid. Now, this is very important, on the platform's own terms of service. What a coincidence, because of course here in the UK, as the online safety bill is continuing its way through Parliament, one of the big issues over the last number of months has been this issue of legal but harmful. And what does legal but harmful mean? What's the definition? There's been lots of pushback, and so the government has dropped that idea. But what's it dropped that idea in favour of? Let's remind ourselves. Here's Michelle Donelan writing in Conservative Home a few days ago. For adults, my new triple shield, she said, mechanism delivers choice. Where content is illegal, clearly it should be removed. But if a platform says in its terms and conditions that it does not allow certain content, they must keep that promise and remove it. So again, it's an attack, or it's the attack vector in terms of censorship is the terms of service. So I'm finding it very interesting. Patrick, has there been some recognition, some agreement between international partners that this is a good mechanism for censorship in the future if governments legislatively have not got the confidence to move ahead with this idea of legal but harmful, removing harms in some kind of arbitrary way, forcing social media companies, therefore, to impose whatever restrictions they have and consistently impose whatever restrictions they have in their terms of service. I just find it interesting that this approach is now being taken in different countries.
So then the question, Mike, is what about the terms of service? How specific will the terms of service be if they talk about hate speech or hate crime, which isn't actually legally defined, by the way? A lot of people aren't aware of that. It's just kind of an arbitrary label. So if they say that, so it's up to the social media companies to how they're going to word that. The problem is if they say that we'll remove hateful content or whatever, that's how long is a piece of string? Hateful content or hate speech. Now, there has been a problem with fake hate crimes. This is an established practice by certain organizations that want to get more attention or get more sympathy or support. This is a reality. In the physical world, fake hate crimes are real, and online they're probably very easy to do. And if you look at some of these counterintelligence and online boiler rooms run by various militaries in NATO, i.e. Brigade 77 and so forth,
right?
What's to stop a group within a cell like that to start posing as extreme far right and putting up anti-Semitic or bigoted language and attacking Jews and so forth, and then all of a sudden the groups, the anti-hate groups, then go to the government and say, look at all this hate speech. They have to remove this immediately. It's too much. It's too much. And the government comes in and fines them, how many million a day, because they're not removing it fast enough.
Well, in fact, they're talking about custodial sentences for executives if those terms and conditions are not enforced.
How do you know what's legitimate in terms of what people are actually posting? It's amazing how the fringe freak activity online is going to be used to determine if these social media companies are going to be able to exist at all. It is just beyond the pale. The whole thing is ridiculous. If it's not illegal, then it shouldn't be prohibited. So, is it the government's job to make sure that people don't feel offended or don't feel, quote, harmed? What does harmed mean? Again, there's no definition for that. This whole thing is ridiculous. It's designed to throttle free speech. and freedom of expression. And this is the chief desire of governments right now. They want to throttle speech and centralized speech control through fact checkers, or they'll do it by trying to maneuver big tech companies into a corner. Okay, in the U.S., they threaten to break them up. That's the behind-the-scenes threat. We're going to break you up, like we did Bell Telecoms and so forth, with antitrust legislation. So in Europe, if you get a Twitter legal notice, it usually comes from Germany, because either all the legal issues in Europe are handled in Germany, or all of the agents of influence who are trolling my account and other people always get a German legal notice in their inbox saying, we've looked in it, it's not a violation of German law. I've got a half a dozen of these before I got banned. By the way, I'm back on Twitter as of this week.
And a number of others as well.
Pepe Escobar, Scott Ritter, and a number of other accounts just reappeared this week. So after 18 months of being banned, I'm back on Twitter at 21Wire. So Elon Musk, the compassionate, has allowed me back. So thank you, Elon, for that. Most appreciated. But yeah, so it is coming from Germany. So that's interesting. So Germany is somehow a hub of activity. Is it the NSA boiler rooms there in Stuttgart airspace doing that? Troll farms in U.S. military bases in Germany? Or is that where it's coming from? I mean,
good question.
All these pings on Twitter for legal notices, we'll see.
But what about Facebook then?
Well, Facebook is going to be letting Trump back in the fold, Mike, on Instagram and Facebook. He's back on Twitter. He hasn't used it yet. It's the fundraising, Mike. This is one of the reasons why they've yanked him off and kept him off, is because he's raised a lot of money on social media, a lot of money through social media. It wasn't just because Trump's speech is dangerous, but also this is a huge boon for the traffic, because when you have the biggest accounts like this coming back, a lot of excitement, and it energizes the platforms. So the advertisers, of course, are interested, despite what they might be saying in terms of how much they hate Trump. But the head of global affairs at Facebook in Palo Alto, California, is a familiar face.
To the British, anyway.
To the British. And do you know who it is, Mike?
Yes.
It's the former leader of the Liberal Democrat Party.
Former Deputy Prime Minister.
Who destroyed the Liberal Democrat Party by doing a 11 p.m. last-minute deal with David Cameron, a power-sharing agreement. So that was an amazing move by the Tories. But their Machiavellian skills never cease to impress us. But here's Nick Clegg, talking about Facebook banning Trump, and that Facebook doesn't play winners and losers in politics.
All right.
Let's listen to Cleggy.
Other people who maybe still didn't get suspended on Facebook or Instagram, who have done or said other things. And I'm just trying to get a sense of where the community standards are for political speech, and what you took from that day on that decision.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I don't think it helps to go through each and every single post that appeared that day. There are other posts which had a much more, at best, ambivalent message of support for those who did, indulge in exceptional violence at the center of American democracy on that day. But where we draw the line is, as a general principle, we're a private company, we're a private tech company, we're not a political entity. We don't try and make decisions which sort of, help or hinder one side or the other. We believe in free and open debate, particularly in the world's most powerful democracy, the United States. We're trying to strike the right balance between free expression, free and open political debate, whilst at the same time making sure that for all the users who use Facebook and Instagram, it's an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, what qualifies them to find this balance?
He's lying. They do play winners and losers. They are partisan. They are biased. They absolutely went after conservative accounts. They purged thousands of those accounts before the 2020 elections, okay? And they took the President of the United States off the platform who didn't commit any crime or anything like that. So, and it turns out, Mike, the whole January 6th farrago, all the evidence that continues to come out is that the whole thing was driven by FBI paid informants. And this thing was a perfect storm that was set up to happen for maximum theatrical effect. Okay, that's the evidence. Okay, so what Nick Clegg is telling you is total partisan propaganda. And again, it's the British influence in U.S. elections. So Christopher Steele, Nick Clegg, Spygate. It's interesting, isn't it, how the Britain's got its hand meddling, interfering in U.S. Political affairs at the very key junctures as well. Very well positioned. I would say Britain's very good at what they do in that department.
Absolutely.
They have 100, 200, 300 years experience. So I think nothing to be scoffed at. But here's the story that you need to look at. The feds are adapting an AI system used to silence ISIS, or they think Islamic extremists online, to combat American dissent on vaccines and elections. The federal government working hand in hand with universities, private companies, and big tech, and funneling millions of dollars of taxpayer money to fund AI censorship programs to be used on American citizens here. Just a snapshot. This is really an embodiment of the whole of society censorship framework that departments like the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, talked about as being their utopian vision for censorship only a few years ago, says Mr. Benz, featured in this article here. Excellent piece here, by the way. We see it now coming to fruition. What's he talking about as well? And if you think about the Twitter files, Mike, and the sort of manual censorship, i.e. pressure put by government agencies like the FBI, DHS, HSS, NSA, CIA, directly on big tech with blacklists and so forth. Where are they getting those blacklists? Because they're not all coming from government. They're working with university departments, think tanks, and other programs that are getting federal funded. So here's the flow chart. So you've got government here, government agencies in the upper left-hand corner of this diagram, and then they're feeding down to civil society agencies and organizations, universities, NGOs, activists, community leaders, nonprofits, and foundations, then over to the news media and fact checkers, politically like-minded, mainstream media, mainstream journalists, etc., professional journalists, i.e. this priestly class of journalists. You can't be a journalist if you're a citizen journalist, or if you're on Twitter as an independent researcher. You shouldn't be allowed to call yourself a journalist. You have to belong to the special super class, okay? And then feeds that up to the private sector. That's big tech. The important box on here, Mike, is the one that nobody pays attention to. That's in the lower left-hand corner, okay? That's the quote, civil society box. These are university teams of academics, some of which are augmented by former Facebook executives who go into these universities and departments, and they draw up blacklists and they draw up heat maps as to what they call mapping disinformation, using Glyphy and using CrowdTangle and some of these web tools. They are not mapping disinformation. They're mapping dissent. They're mapping dissident speech. They're doxing users on Twitter, on Facebook, and I say this because I'm one of those people, okay? And I've been featured in their 21st Century Wire has been featured in their academic findings, papers, and conferences. So I know exactly how this works, and we've been tracking this really since they started doing this type of work. And this was launched in the wake of Donald Trump's victory in the 2016 election. It caused a massive crisis in the Democratic Party, and they mobilized all of their assets, money, and anything they could get their hands on to try to basically find out how they can control the social media, how they control speech on the internet. And you're seeing right with this diagram exactly how it's done now. So understand all of those actors together work as a system. And this is how it works. So the Integrity Initiative is kind of an interesting, Mike, parallel to that, because it does sort of, function in the same way.
Well, it was a civil society organization. It was set up as a charity, as we know, and it involved people from all those various other groups. So you had people from universities, had people from NGOs, it had people from mainstream media, it had people from the military and the intelligence services. So quite a diverse group. Obviously not all core members of that organization, of the Institute for Statecraft, but they were all associated with it in some way.
And Atlantic Council and the DFR labs were part of that mix.
Yes.
And then they would communicate with big tech. And by the way, head of the DFR labs and Atlantic Council went straight to Facebook. Ben Nemo. So is he involved in this censorship matrix? I think he is. Is he involved in validating blacklists of journalists and activists that need to be silenced on Facebook? It's highly likely that he would be. We don't know for sure, but certainly looking at his pedigree with the Institute for or Integrity Initiative type activity and Atlantic Council and his statements in public and supporting Bellingcat, I would tend to think that he would be involved in that same activity at Facebook.
Yeah.
So that is global censorship coming out of America with a multinational team there, including Nick Clegg and others.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting story.